Even if Amazon only accounts for a small percent of my total sales, what happens on Amazon has an impact to every part of my business: selling, advertising, collecting data.
They are getting richer, it seems, because they're taking the commission on every sale and this massive, to the tune of $31 billion in ad revenue. Where's the relief for the sellers?
When they said, we need to figure out how to scale our last mile logistics, they decided to go build their own capabilities and built out, what is now known as the other Amazon DSP.
Shopify comes out and says, we're going to make a huge commitment into fulfillment. We're going to spend $1 billion, right, on fulfillment in the next 2 years. Well, guess what? Amazon just spent $100 billion during COVID. How in the world can they compete with that?
If we think of Amazon, the good old days versus where it is today, yeah, it's easy to say, I don't like the model now.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. We are joined today by my dear old friend, James Thomson. Not that he's old, but our friendship is old. The godfather of the Amazon seller, as we unpack a lot of the recent gangster moves by Amazon with Prime and the Deliver acquisition by Shopify. We're going to tap into James' PhD marketing brain, and we're going to find out what this means for sellers and what this means for Amazon. With me today is my old friend and co-warrior in this Amazon selling game, James Thomson. James is a newly minted free agent after stepping down from the company he co-founded, Buy Box Experts. James, welcome to the show. And what are you up to now?
Still paying attention to what's going on at Amazon, and not a day goes by where there aren't major announcements that have major implications to sellers. As you and I have both taken part of our career to focus on how do you educate brands, how do you educate sellers, how do you help them understand what all these changes mean and how to essentially stay afloat with all the changes. So, nothing changes with my role in terms of focusing on how do we help sellers, how do we help brands to do the right things by their business. So,
is there floating, James? Because I remember as a seller, I was my head was below water with a tiny straw sticking out most of the time in this Amazon selling game. But, it seems to me, going all the way back when you and I first met, you were the sports and outdoors category manager. I think at the time, probably our fourth category manager. And things were a lot simpler then. If you go back to that moment when we met, and by the way, folks, when I met James Thomson, it was in Seattle. We talked several times on the phone. I show up at Seattle headquarters, and there's a lot of these folks wearing Jeff Bezos blue dress shirt and sport coats and jeans. And then I see this guy coming at me with a Edmonton Oilers hockey jersey. Says, "I'm James Thomson. Hi guys, come and talk to me." And I knew immediately, James, that we were going to be good friends. You weren't trying to be one of the clones over there, and you always looked out for the seller. And I always appreciated that. But if you go back to that time and you think about it, and could you imagine Amazon being the size that it is today, the complexity that it is today, the juggernaut that it is today, all the way back when we first started talking back in, was it 06, 07, something like that?
I joined Amazon because I had already had the experience of being able to buy some CDs on Amazon. And I really liked collecting music. And I thought, this is really cool that I go work for a company that sells the CDs that I buy. And then I show up at Amazon and it's like, oh, actually, we have all these other categories of products. I thought, okay, well, that makes sense. I've never bought anything other than a CD on Amazon, but okay. Within 2 weeks of getting there, I had to buy some baby clothes because I had a new niece. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. I'm buying a bunch of stuff that I would normally hate having to go into a store to buy. And I thought, okay, if I can buy stuff that I don't normally like having to shop in physical retail, there might be something to this. And as Amazon kept adding categories, I thought, okay, yeah, this is good. It's reasonably quick. Amazon Prime as a concept was still fairly new. FBA was completely nascent. There was no such thing as Amazon advertising. The game at that time was, let's get brands, let's get sellers, let's get selection on the site. We'll worry about all the other stuff later. And quite frankly, if you could get a bunch of stuff on the site, you had a bigger store than anybody else. And that was exciting to customers. That was exciting to Amazon. By the time I got to maybe my third year, which is about 2010, the game had changed a little bit, which is we've got most of the big selection we need, the key brands. Now we need price competition. We need a third, fourth, 10th seller selling the same stuff, because that's going to create price competition between and among sellers. And everybody likes lower prices except the brands, but customers love lower prices. So let's go find ways to create lower prices by having this competition. You fast forward, to 2015, FBA is alive and well. All new sellers coming to Amazon are having to seriously consider, do they use FBA and come out of the gates quickly? Or do they continue to think that somehow their own puny little warehouse and doing deliveries, or excuse me, fulfillment out of their own warehouse, that they'll be able to keep up with Amazon? Uh,
No, I was
no.
one of them that could not.
Well, you were also in a situation where you were selling oversized products, which is extra challenging for FBA.
Yeah,
I had the opportunity in about 2010, 11 to bring a bunch of large Amazon sellers who weren't using FBA, to bring them on tours of some of the Amazon fulfillment centers. And it's this crazy situation where the sellers will walk in, they'd look around, 2 million, 3 million square foot space with conveyor belts everywhere and just amazing technology, even back then. And they would say, "Oh, okay, I get it. So you can basically absorb every order they'll have all year, and it won't even be a drop in the bucket in this space." It's like, yeah, we can absorb 100,000 orders and no one's going to blink. And so a lot
yeah,
of sellers who weren't using FBA would say, well, maybe FBA is a good thing if I exceed my capacity in my warehouse. And by the time I got to 2013 or so, it became clear you have to be Prime eligible to be relevant in organic search.
yeah,
And by the time, I'm sorry, I'm jumping back and forth between times here, but by 2015, Amazon advertising has been launched, and it was one of those, hey, if you've got some extra money and you want to try to bump yourself to the front of the line, maybe you should think about doing some advertising. Well, at the same time, Amazon started in a big way recruiting overseas sellers who recognized quickly that if they spent a bunch of money on advertising and decided to forego initial margins, but decided as a result they would get much better placement in organic search, or in this case on the first page of search results. Maybe that was a good model for quickly ramping up. And if you combine that with FBA and you're Prime eligible, gosh darn it, you could sell pretty much any widget. Even if the widget's not very good, you could sell the widget and get top placement. And the model for Amazon has moved away from, we've got to have the 10 or 20 most important brands in any category, to we got to have whatever's up there, and any brand of any brand equity, good or bad, and anything in between. Any of those companies is in a position to win top placement if they've got the margin to spend on advertising. It's a very different model, and brands have had to
yeah.
adjust and decide, is this the place we want to play? At the same time, Amazon has become absolutely massive in the e-commerce space. And so if you're a brand and you think that somehow you can ignore Amazon because, gosh, it only accounts for a small percent of my overall sales, yeah, I mean,
Or you don't like them.
it's complete nonsense.
Yeah,
If you don't have an active Amazon channel strategy, be that selling, advertising, collecting data, you've got to have a strategy no matter what you're doing in every other channel where you happen to be selling. So, that's the big evolution in the last 15 years is, once upon a time, Amazon was this cool place where you could say, oh, I'll make a few extra dollars selling some stuff online, but it's not my primary channel, to, oh gosh, I better have an active Amazon channel strategy that I pay great attention to, because even if Amazon only accounts for a small percent of my total sales, what happens on Amazon has an impact to every part of my business, every channel in which I sell, every listing that I create, every ad campaign, online or offline, that I create. There's an Amazon implication, and you better understand this new language called Amazon.
100% right. And there's been, no better teacher out there than you to help communicate that language, that Amazon language, that Amazon business than you, James. I mean, just listening to your story, there's a lot of phases that you just went through. Two stories pop into my head as you mentioned this.
Mm,
Number one, the week before, you called me at my office in LA saying, Jason, we got this thing called Fulfillment by Amazon. The week before you called, and we're going to take your inventory and we're going to store it, ship it for you. And guess what? You're going to get the Prime badge. And I was like, no, no, no. And then you said, but you'll get 30% increase in your sales. I'm like, give me the address. I'll send it tomorrow. Right. The week before, in my warehouse, which was a sizable warehouse in Los Angeles,
Yeah.
the guy was creating the pillows, those air pillows that
Sure.
go into the boxes to get stuff out the door.
Sure.
And in the front of this thing, in big red letters with a circle, don't put your hand in the machine. That's what it said. Keep your hand away from the machine. And my guy had shoved his hand exactly where he wasn't supposed to. So a week before you called and said, I can take away that warehouse burden for you, I had rushed my guy to the emergency room to sew his hand back on because he had done something incredibly stupid in my warehouse. So I was like, heck yeah, I'll sign up for FBA. Where do we send it? And then you sprinkle in that you can get a 30% increase in revenue. It's just clearly a no-brainer. The second part that I want to point out
Yeah.
that reminds me is I remember that. I remember getting that call from Amazon and saying, oh, sponsored products. It's so cheap. It's a nickel a click. And I had a panic attack because I didn't start as an Amazon seller in 2002. I started as an e-commerce seller. And I remember the good old days of paying a nickel a click to Overture,
Yep.
who had invented pay-per-click advertising, later bought by Yahoo, to drive traffic on the first page of all the Alta Vistas and the Everything Vistas websites that were out there at the time. And I remember how that movie ended.
Yeah.
It ended with going from a nickel a click
Yeah.
to 50 cents to $5 to $15. And I could no longer make money on the first sale when I was selling a basketball hoop or a pool table. So I remember just going, this is bad. Sponsored products is bad. And here we are in a situation where, that nickel a click sure as hell's gone. That ain't coming back. I mean, I was looking at one of our campaigns. There's $40 a click sometimes, $20 a click sometimes. And in the meantime, Amazon is still taking that take rate as if they don't charge for ads as well. And so they are getting richer, it seems, because they're taking the commission on every sale and this massive, to the tune of $31 billion in ad revenue. Where's the relief for the sellers? When's that coming, James? Do you think it will ever come, or is that ship sailed?
If I take a frame of reference of the grocery store and the shelf space at the grocery store, there have been slotting fees there forever. And when Amazon first started, there weren't really any slotting fees. Yes, you had to pay a selling commission just like you do today, but you didn't really pay for better placement on the shelf. You didn't pay to have an end of aisle display. You didn't pay for any of that stuff. And as Amazon recruited more and more people from traditional retail who understood not only was their appetite for brands to get that kind of placement, but they had big slush funds available that you could tap into to get those dollars. It inherently makes sense that Amazon would want to get a piece of that action. And so if we think of Amazon, the good old days versus where it is today, yeah, it's easy to say, I don't like the model now because in the old days I didn't have to spend as much. It wasn't as difficult to compete because there was two other companies in my subcategory. Yeah, things have changed an awful lot. I guess short of I'm not really here to complain or congratulate Amazon on anything. I acknowledge the fact that things have changed a lot. But quite frankly, as if a brand wants access to a crazy number of customers and they show up on day one and they're doing that in a physical retail channel, they're either giving up so much margin to the retailer or they're buying out every billboard in 20 miles of the retail store that it's going to get really expensive. At the end
Yeah.
of the day, Amazon's fortunate and aggressive in making sure that they participate in every part of that value chain so they make money all along the way. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter which product the customer ultimately buys, as long as the customer sees all the selections, sees the ads, decides to buy something, and hopefully it's through Prime. Amazon's going to make money all along the way, and I don't think that's
Yeah.
going to change anytime soon. I think just as 7, 8 years ago, Amazon started to get very aggressive in recruiting overseas sellers, they're going to continue to find new overseas sellers that bring new selection. We don't need 500 Bluetooth speakers on Amazon, but Amazon's going to go find the 501st Bluetooth speaker seller. As long as that seller says, I'm prepared to participate in this Amazon channel that has these cost structures, this competitive situation, Amazon says, great, there's no real marginal cost for us to throw your product up into the catalog.
Speaking of change
Yeah.
and James, I always love it when you drop an email in my inbox because I always know there's like a news story that's coming out on Amazon. This buy with Prime thing
Yep.
is very, very interesting, and I'm gonna tee it up for you. So, Amazon most recent report, depending on who you talk to, has 50 to 56% of the online market share. So you got Walmart hovering around 6 to 7% of the
Mm.
online market share, but then you've got this interesting thing that's not really a marketplace called Shopify that is growing very rapidly. That all of a sudden
Mm.
has about $170 billion in GMV from its brands that are running merchant fees and sales through these individual e-commerce platforms. And I think it was last year, Amazon purchased a company called Cells out of Australia, and I thought, there it is. Amazon's for sure. I think that came in. We had a little email exchange on that. I think a year and a half ago, they came out and they said, we're going to buy this SaaS e-commerce platform that was, I don't know if it was equivalent or not. I never used the product, but you say you could call it a Shopify-like tool or a big commerce-like SaaS e-commerce platform. And I thought, here it comes. Amazon's going to turn that forward and they're going to go after that Shopify market share. Of course, last week they just shut it down.
Yep.
And that's not to say that they don't have the software still to be able to spin this up. But then Buy with Prime comes out.
Yeah.
And James, what do we make of this? For those of you who don't know, Buy with Prime allows a e-commerce seller from their own website, if they have inventory placed in Amazon's FBA shop, to place a Prime badge on their listing on their own website. James, it's the first time we've ever heard about this. I've teed this up a little bit for you. Where's this going?
So, what is Amazon really good at doing? They're good at scaling things. They scaled out their website, and when they couldn't scale any further with third party providers, they said, let's go build this thing that turned into AWS. When they said, we need to figure out how to scale our last mile logistics, they decided to go build their own capabilities and built out, what is now known as the other Amazon DSP, the delivery service platform. And so you've got a situation where Amazon, first and foremost, needs to keep building and scaling the services that are needed to deliver on the Prime promise. And one of those components is building out warehouse space and building out the logistics to support the warehouse space. And Amazon had to ramp up that capacity in a crazy way as soon as COVID kicked in. And quite frankly, they were just as surprised as everybody else just how much demand was going to come in through Prime. And they had to tweak things and figure out how do we catch up with the demand for Prime. They built a bunch of warehouse space. They continue to build warehouse space every year. Now they're saying, oh, we may have a little bit too much warehouse space for where we are today. But let's keep in mind, what is it, 30% growth in FBA year after year on the last 10-year basis. Amazon will be able to fill the warehouse space they have today at some point, and they could fill it today just by changing the rules around what products they allow into FBA. But with the
Sure.
constraints they put in place, they're saying they have extra capacity. Well, extra capacity, yes, you want to fill extra capacity, but having extra capacity in a way means that Amazon has built scale, which means the average cost of being able to do a single order or being able to hold a single unit of product in a warehouse, those costs have gone down because Amazon's built this wildly huge scale. So when we think about what's Amazon doing to keep the costs of FBA and the cost of Prime lower than what it would otherwise be if they didn't have scale, you got to have scale. If you have scale, you lower the costs. So I don't think it's a bad thing that Amazon has a little bit too much warehouse space. As I say, they will fill that at some point, one way or the other, either through existing 1P and 3P selection, or in this case, by them saying, well, wait a minute, we've got some extra capacity. Let's figure out what to do with it. The analysts and the newspaper folks are all up in arms saying, well, Amazon's doing this because it's a way for them to unfairly create advantage by collecting data on what's happening with other marketplaces or other mark e-commerce sites like Shopify. And yes, for what is now the largest alternative collection of sellers out there, it's going to be the Shopify platform, if I can call it that. So I understand why Amazon's offering that extra capacity through this buy with Prime option. But it's also Amazon recognizing We need to be where customers are, not just where Amazon customers are. And there are brands
Mm.
that obviously have sales beyond just Amazon. So if fulfillment and returns management are two of the biggest frustrations for brands, and Amazon's got lots of it. In fact, they've got so much capacity in both those fronts. Why not offer that as a service? Totally makes sense. We can sit here and hypothesize, was this designed specifically to go after Shopify, or was it designed to go after all non Amazon channels where e-commerce customers may be participating in buying stuff, and the retailers and brands may not necessarily be as good as Amazon at handling logistics and returns? At the end of the day, I don't think it really matters.
Yeah.
Amazon wants to be able to continue to scale its logistics out. They want to be able to continue to drive down the unit cost of every piece of inventory they handle for inbound inventory or for outbound, Prime eligible shipments. Amazon needs to keep doing that. So they need excess capacity. They're just finding a clever way to use it. In this case, by way of creating a new offering. Now, if I'm a Shopify seller and I also happen to be an Amazon seller, and I see this and I say, great, I know how easy it is to scale my business using FBA. Wouldn't it be great for me to not have to go and find a 3PL and split inventory and do all this stuff that I've had to do to build up my Shopify site? Buy with Prime looks like a great option. And quite frankly, for sellers that were overwhelmed with returns in Q4, they know the frustration that's dealt to them by having to deal with all this bits and bobs of stuff that comes back in January and February. So, buy with Prime is definitely going to be an enticing offer for brands that already have an existing experience with FBA. But, and it's the big but, and I'll stop there before I get into that. But the way I think about it from a logical Amazon perspective, I see why they're offering this, even if we don't get into, all the, well, they're really trying to use their advantages against others. Maybe yes, maybe no, but it doesn't really matter because I don't think too many people would disagree with the comment that Amazon's better at doing package shipment than just about
And
anybody else out
anybody.
there. And so,
Yeah,
wouldn't it be great
certainly,
for them?
certainly final mile. No
Let's take
question.
that service and let's
Yeah.
make it available for other types of organizations or customers who might want to get that same experience on non-Amazon purchases. Wouldn't it be great to have that high level of performance coming out of those other orders? So I'll
You know,
stop there for a moment.
fascinating discussion, right? I think that this is one of the first examples too. Well, maybe the second, if you consider Prime Video, where the value of this Prime membership is now transcending the .com platform, and you can lump up Prime Video in that as well. Back in the day, we used to think that the Costco membership was like the coolest thing ever. They hardly make any money on their products, but they make so much money in this membership. There's nothing like it. I think Prime has surpassed it. I mean, not to take anything away from Costco. You can't take away my Prime account nor my Costco card, James. I'm not giving those up, right? They're both really strong memberships, but I think it's just fascinating that they're doing it. And it does seem like, to me, in my opinion, that this is a backdoor way to come and pay attention to that very significant market share that Shopify is eating up right now in the e-commerce space. Now, you agree with that or you disagree? I mean, let me ask another way, James,
Yeah,
before you answer.
yeah.
Is Amazon paying attention to the GMV that Shopify is bringing in? Because I think they are.
I think they are, but some of this comes down to the whole question of discoverability. How much selection is on Shopify that isn't already on Amazon, or how much generic selection is on Shopify that Amazon isn't already bidding for those very same keywords for products that they already have on Amazon? And so, to the extent that a customer is doing product search on Google, lo and behold, they're not searching on Amazon, but they're actually going to Google. Chances are there's already an Amazon product listing that's showing up very much at the top of the page.
Guaranteed.
And so
Guaranteed.
it's not
Yeah.
just about we're going after the revenue for products that very specific products that may not otherwise be on Amazon. I think at some level, Amazon's not going to take back the Shopify revenue. Instead, they're going to participate in being able to add a service to all of that revenue. So they're going to essentially become, like the consultant to the number two competitor. So don't necessarily take over that business, but make sure that you participate. And as your competitor grows, you also have the opportunity to enjoy the growth that comes from that. This is a very, very clever way to do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
If I could, though, one of the things that I haven't seen very many people talk about with regards to the buy with Prime discussion is the fact that if you, as a seller, want to implement buy with Prime on your website today, it comes with one very important restriction, which is you must also install Amazon Pay on your website. It
Right.
doesn't mean you have to exclude other payment systems, but you have to at least include Amazon Pay as an option on your website. And so, for example, if you're a Shopify seller today, and let's just say that you're using PayPal, that's your shopping cart of choice, or you're using Square, Stripe, or there's so many payment services now, but you're not using Amazon Pay, but you're using some other fulfillment system, and you say, you know what, I could do much better by my customers by putting buy with Prime in place. Lo and behold, you're going to have to install Amazon Pay on your website as well. So now Amazon gets to participate in the payment side of the equation as well as in the fulfillment side of the equation. And I've seen many situations where, as soon as you add the Amazon Pay option on your own website, a disproportionate number of customers will use the Amazon Pay option to make payments because, quite frankly, they don't want to have to give their credit card information to a website they may never have purchased from in the past, and they
Yeah.
trust that Amazon's going to do right by them. And so Amazon will make money on the pay side, Amazon will make money on the fulfillment side. That's good for Amazon. So, is this a good thing for Shopify? And this, I think, is the real
You
crux.
beat me to that question. It's a great question, and I just want to highlight for a second what you're saying. Shopify's revenue stream for a very long time has been payment processing.
Yes, it has been.
So
Yep.
so what you have highlighted here is in my mind, and you've already thought about it, a significant threat to that payment processing revenue because so let's ask the question that you just asked. Should Shopify allow
Hmm.
the buy with Prime badge on its Shopify stores? Put your Shopify hat on for a second. Pretend you're Toby.
So, before I answer that question, I want to look into the future and say, forget forget about buy with Prime. Let's imagine a world where buy with Prime wasn't available. And I'm a brand today. My products are on Amazon, be it through a first party relationship, a direct third party relationship. Maybe I have a 2P reseller representing my brand, but my products are on Amazon. Amazon customers can get that product through Prime. Amazon says, you know what? 2 day Prime isn't good enough. We're going to start working on 1 day Prime, and we're going to reset expectations among consumers that anything less than 1 day, that's garbage. You need to start to want instantaneous consumption and get stuff within 1 day. Okay, so we fast forward 2 years, and now brands are in a situation where if their products are sold on Amazon, customers have come to expect they're going to get stuff within roughly a day. The brand says, you know what, we don't like putting all of these products on Amazon. We're going to go build our own direct to consumer site. And we're going to aim to try to carve away some of the demand that's on Amazon and capture that through our direct to consumer site. Okay, so the brand says, we're going to go get a 3PL to help us. We're going to get, a 3PL that's got locations all over the country so we can do some kind of faster delivery than shipping it all out of one location. Lo and
Which,
behold,
by the way, is a pain in the neck. I have done that multiple times in my career. It's not easy to do. Go ahead.
there are very, very few logistics and fulfillment companies today that not only have enough locations properly distributed across the country, but have the capabilities to get the products out to customers within 2 to 3 days. But Amazon's already doing, or is going to be in a position fairly soon to be able to do 1 day fairly consistently. And so, if I'm a customer and I can buy it on Amazon and get it within 1 day, or I can track down the brand's direct to consumer site and get it within 2 to 3 days, I hope. I think part of the play here is Amazon recognizing customers will have become so acclimated to 1 day delivery that as long as Amazon's basically the only carrier out there or the only logistics company out there that can provide 1 day, why not offer
Yeah.
that to anybody who wants it? Of
Yeah.
course, it comes at a cost. And so now The question Shopify has to be asking itself is, do we want to accept this situation that is suboptimal in the long run, but gives us time for us to make investments and potentially trying to replicate some sort of a 1 day delivery network of our own across the country? Or do you wait 2 years, 3 years before Shopify actually gets the whole thing built themselves? At which point, Amazon has only made it harder for brands to try to peel off of Amazon and do their direct to consumer site that actually has viable 1 day delivery options. So, just as Amazon often learns from other companies, and once they've learned enough, they go and build it themselves, I
Right.
see this as a situation where Shopify may have to accept the fact, yeah, we're not very good at doing 1 day delivery or providing that service to all of our sellers. Somebody else, albeit Amazon, somebody else is going to provide that and at least allow our brands to be able to compete better with Amazon in terms of giving customers fast delivery capabilities. Even though we don't want that to happen long term, we need time and more money to be able to build out that capability to be able to offer it to our sellers ourselves. I could see a model where if Shopify had the investment capital and the primary focus of we need to build out last mile logistics, or I guess it's more than last mile logistics, but it's 3PLing plus last mile logistics to be able to support 1 to let's say 2 day delivery consistently across the country. Only at that point is the Shopify site actually in a position to compete for Amazon customers who have already become acclimated to the 1 day delivery model. That's a big problem. And
Yeah.
I think it's better to say we're going to allow this other company to come in and provide this service, even though it's not a good long term solution. For the time being, while we wait and figure out how to build this out ourselves, we need to make sure that we do have some kind of an offering. Otherwise, we're just not going to be able to get brands to build out meaningful direct to consumer sites on a Shopify platform.
Because that logistics delivery to the door component is so helpful for sellers to be able to grow and expand, just like you guys figured out when you were still at Amazon. There was this big growth curve and then it sort of flattened off because they couldn't carry the inventory, and the guy that was in the warehouse kept getting his hand chopped off by the air pillow machine, right? And it's like all these things were preventing them from growing. And so it's interesting. So if I could summarize
Yeah,
here, James,
yeah,
what you're saying, if you're Toby and you got the cool hat like he wears, the Shopify guy, then you're going to allow buy with Prime on the Shopify stores now. Learn as much as you can. Continue to build out your fulfillment.
yep,
You're kind of damned if you do. You're really damned if you don't
yep,
as well.
yep.
So you think that's what I think they've really painted him in a corner. I think they've painted Shopify in a corner.
So,
And
so, so
you
let's
know,
let's go back pre-COVID. Amazon
yeah,
Amazon told the world we're going to move towards 1 day delivery. They told the
yep,
world that. And they told
yeah,
Amazon sellers, if you're doing seller fulfilled Prime, you can't do that anymore unless you get at least a certain percent of your seller fulfilled Prime orders to customers within 1 day. They announced that over 2 years ago. And
yeah.
th-
It's coming.
that tells
I
me,
agree with you completely.
brands have already been basically given the heads up. Other marketplaces, other platforms have been told that's where the puck is going. We need to go there because customers are going to become so comfortable with 1 day delivery that if we don't figure out a way to fight that and be able to compete effectively with that, then gosh, we're going to lose anyways. And Shopify was already losing 2 years ago when Amazon made that announcement. And 2 years has gone by, and I'm not sure that Shopify has meaningfully addressed that. They did just
Yeah,
buy Deliver. I get that, but even
yep,
even with one delivery company, the size of FBA compared to say Deliver, FBA is oodles times bigger than what
yeah.
Deliver can support today. And whether it's
And
Deliver,
I
whether it's some other 3PL network that a Shopify seller is using, we know that we have to get towards 1 day delivery for customers to be comfortable buying on Shopify versus buying on Amazon.
I completely agree. It's funny. You see these, um, their quarterly reports, and Shopify comes out and says, we're going to make a huge commitment into fulfillment. We're going to spend $1 billion, right, on fulfillment in the next 2 years, not even a year, James, in the next 2 years to build out our fulfillment network. Well, guess what? Amazon just spent $100 billion during COVID. how in the world can they compete with that? And look, your point on deliver, I couldn't agree with you more. I don't think there is a scenario where Shopify can build out the kind of logistics network to even catch up or meaningfully catch up with Amazon. Deliver is a fascinating company, but they're asset light. Do you think that the cost structure on their asset light structure is the same as robots skimming around? You and I have both been to these warehouses. They're amazing.
Yeah.
They're not warehouses. They're robotics software marvels is what they are. And if you don't have your own warehouse and your own robots and your own technology and your own AI and your AWS, can you meaningfully have a lower cost structure for storing, picking, packing, and delivering packages? I don't think you can. So the question is, well, two questions. The first question is, if that's the case,
Hmm.
there's still a home for Shopify here? Are there still going to be those brands that are just giving the bird to Amazon because they hate them and that'll just be happy having their selection with 2 to 4 day delivery on Amazon? Or has Amazon already won?
Okay. So the question comes down to, why do brands need a Shopify or a Shopify site or something like Shopify? And I think it comes down to Amazon doesn't do a lot of things particularly well, like educate consumers on the brand and give the customer lots of time to learn about the brand and watch multiple videos and experience all sorts of information and testimonials and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, Amazon has a few bits and pieces, but if I want to tell my brand story and I want to do it in a um, systematic, longer process than just sort of like, hey, we're a widget and we're right here and we're Prime eligible and we're $14 and you can get it tomorrow. That's very different than, I want to tell you the history of our company. I want to tell you what we're all about. I want to tell you all the good stuff that goes into
Brand story,
manufacturing.
the origin story,
Absolutely,
make the
absolutely,
emotional connection. Right.
absolutely. So
Yeah.
there's a need for a Shopify site for a brand. And I say Shopify, it could be a big commerce site, it could be a Magento site, but
Yeah.
there's a demand for brands to be able to tell their story in a way that they want to tell the story, not in the New York Minute approach that you have to use on Amazon to get your point across. But you can do it in a more relaxed, customized manner if you have your own Shopify site. That's not necessarily the same thing as, and will you sell a bunch of stuff on the Shopify site? But if
Right.
you choose to sell a bunch of stuff as well on the Shopify site, then you've got to be at least in the game with what the key competitors are able to offer around any other type of e-commerce transaction. And that's going to come down to really fast, high performance delivery. And that's not something that a lot of Shopify sellers have been able to make available. And certainly one of the biggest challenges for any of these platforms like Shopify is the consistency of one seller versus another. One Shopify seller is working with one 3PL and they've got stuff, we'll get it to you in 5 to 7 days, we hope. Then you got another seller who's got a bunch of locations across the country and, typically they get 2 to 3 days. If I'm Shopify executives and I'm trying to offer a high quality, consistent experience across all the different sites on my platform, it's very, very hard to do that today. And so the amusing thing about the buy with Prime option is that sellers can decide to implement this right away and they don't have to really wait for Shopify to say yay or nay. It can be rolled out. You just put it into your code and you're off to the
Yeah.
races. the,
Yeah.
the challenge of 2 or 3 years going by and Shopify continuing to invest in building out logistics and so on is that what they ultimately end up building may not necessarily be as good as whatever the version of buy with Prime looks like in 2 to 3 years from now. And it'll be interesting to see if Shopify finds a way to actually turn off the ability of their individual merchants to implement buy with Prime on the site. There's all sorts of interesting anti-competitive issues with that. And
Interesting.
funny to be talking about Amazon with all these
Yeah.
antitrust stuff. But if
Yeah.
Shopify limits which types of fulfillment capabilities one of their own retailers can offer, what are the long-term implications of that? I don't know. Um,
Fascinating.
if there's been a huge adoption of buy with Prime in the next 2 years, and all of a sudden overnight, by the end of this month, we're turning it off. None of you are allowed to use this. Otherwise, we turn you off the Shopify site. I don't know what happens.
Right.
But
Right.
again,
You know,
consumers are going to come to expect fast delivery of whatever it is
Yep.
they want, no matter where
They
they live in the
demand it.
country. They need it.
It's like a God-given right at this point. Remember when everyone laughed when Amazon said 2-day shipping is going to be free? Nobody needs their stuff in 2 days, James. This is never going to work. Remember those naysayers? Now they can't live without it. You're absolutely right. But there's more, right? I mean, I think you're right. Shopify has to accept this. Forget the legal stuff aside, which is a fascinating topic. Maybe you'll come back and we'll talk about that one if that sort of emerges as a growing story. But if Shopify says to its sellers, who many of which are also selling on Amazon, though they won't want to admit it,
Right.
say, no, you can't use buy with Prime on Shopify, that's going to be a really good day for BigCommerce's stock. Look, I think BigCommerce is a really great SaaS e-commerce platform, and they 100% will allow buy with commerce. So they really are painted into a corner. And, the second question I was going to ask about this, James, is I've heard this story before. Hey, Jason, we want you to sell to us through the third party seller marketplace. And there's a firewall between the data that we get for you selling on the Amazon platform and the Amazon buyers. None of that information about your products, about your costs, or any of that stuff is going to make its way over to our buyers. You're totally safe. Well, we all know how that story ends. All of that was going on all of the time, all over the world. And so I know that that's a big concern from some
Yeah.
folks who are driving traffic via Facebook or Google or other manner to their website to get the sale.
Yep.
Should those sellers be concerned that Amazon's going to take if it's pay with Amazon, they're going to get a lot of that data. They're going to get all of their customer data. Should those e-commerce sellers be concerned, or is it a nothing burger?
I don't know, because at this point, I don't know what data is
By
meaningfully
the way, I
private
love it
anymore.
when you have a long pause because I know something's good coming when you have that. I know that long pause, James. I love it. Go
So,
ahead. Sorry to
so
interrupt.
to quote language that Amazon has on the Buy with Prime site, merchants that sell on Amazon.com are not required to have price and selection parity with their Amazon.com listings. So you use Buy with Prime, and you decide, gosh darn it, I can actually sell my products cheaper through my Shopify site because I don't have to pay certain types of fees I pay on Amazon. I'm going to start selling my product at a lower price. Have you just made it easier for Amazon, that's already actively scraping your site anyways? Just made it easier for them to see, well, actually, you're selling it lower, and so we're just going to suppress your buy box on Amazon anyways.
Yeah.
I don't know. I also kind of wonder, like, what
Yes.
information does
Yes.
Amazon
That's
not
exactly
already
what's going to happen.
what information does Amazon not already know about what's happening external to their own
Ah,
website?
that's a good point.
And even if they take all this data in aggregate and say we're not going to look at particular Shopify sellers' data, but instead look at it in aggregate, I'm sure Amazon would love to understand what is it that causes customers to not buy stuff on Amazon when they're already a Prime customer or they're already an active Amazon customer. How can Amazon tweak the experience on Amazon to make it more interesting for customers to A, be able to find the products they might otherwise find on a Shopify site, or B,
Yeah.
create some sort of a rich learning experience that a Shopify site's going to be able to offer in a better way than Amazon. I think those kind of macro issues Amazon would love to understand better, because it makes it, as a platform, better able to compete with any other platform. Um,
Right.
Historically, we've thought about Amazon using specific sellers' data or specific customers' information and using that in ways that regulators get worried about. I actually think it's the aggregate macro type questions that we talked about a moment ago that are going to be much more interesting for Amazon to figure out. They tried web store themselves
Right.
multiple times back in the
Yep.
aughts, and it didn't work. I worked with some
Yeah.
of the Amazon web store folks, and everybody thought that was going to be the way that you get customers to launch their own websites. I say customers, sorry, Amazon sellers to launch their own websites outside of Amazon.
I had one. It wasn't very
It
good.
didn't work.
Yeah.
Shopify came along, and I guess they had enough things that were different that was exciting. But
Yeah.
at this point, and I've heard you say this before many times yourself. This one of the best things that Jeff Bezos ever did was convince Wall Street that profits would be sometime long into the future. In the meantime,
Yeah.
double down, invest everything you have into things like FBA and fulfillment centers. I don't know that Shopify is going to have the same luxury. And so, to the extent that they
No.
make profit every year for the next X years, can they actually invest all that back into logistics to try to catch up with a juggernaut like Prime? It's
Yeah.
really hard to see that ever happening.
I completely agree. And there's another element that we haven't talked about yet that makes this very different, in my opinion, compared to the web store days,
Okay.
right? It was a different Amazon back there, right? When the web stores was happening. Shopify hadn't proven the model that you can do a lot of GMV yet. They did that through a SaaS e-commerce website. And Amazon also didn't have something else. Amazon DSP. They didn't have an advertising platform with first party data that just became infinitely more important because Apple did its thing to Facebook.
Hmm.
And so think about that for a second. On one hand, you're coming in on your e-commerce store to be a fulfillment provider, right? And then on the other hand, hey, by the way, we're the number 3 largest ad revenue company in the United States, where 95% of the ads that we offer point in one place. We're going to now turn those out. So you can use our Amazon ad platform to drive traffic to your buy on Amazon listings on
Hmm.
your website.
Hmm.
Now we're going to make money on the merchant. We're going to make money on the merchant fees. Now we're going to make money on the fulfillment fees. And we're going to use up some of that excess capacity you're talking about. And also, we're really going to make money. We are really going to make money on advertising. We're going to leapfrog Facebook overnight when we flip that switch. Is that a possibility?
Whether buy with Prime is present or not, Amazon's going to continue to build out DSP using its first party data. They have better first party consumption and search data than anybody else. And so they'll continue to leverage that in every possible way, whether it's putting ads on the types of places where sellers might otherwise have put ads to direct people to Shopify sites. Amazon will be sitting there trying to bid up and get that placement to drive the traffic back to Amazon product listings. At the end of the day, again, I want to put all the legal issues aside. Amazon has carefully planted a lot of different seeds, and the network effect that's in place now, being able to say we're going to take this and leverage this and build that. There's a lot of things here where inherently you say, well, gosh, how does anybody ultimately compete with Amazon? And the answer is it's really, really hard. Even if you've got
Yeah.
the best fulfillment capability, how do you drive traffic to it better than Amazon? Or if you've got the
Right.
best selection, which I think Amazon will
Good luck.
will have the best, the best by what I mean is the largest selection. It's
Yep.
all these different dimensions Amazon has invested for 25 years to build out, and so these other companies are going to have to do a deal with the devil on some front to say, well, we can't be as good as Amazon is on all these different fronts. We're going to figure out how to be at least as good on one or two of these dimensions, and on the other stuff, we're not going to be able to be there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, here we are in another scenario where is even if you are a brand and you have significant concerns about your customer data being shared and taken by Amazon, what is your option? If there's no other option available to do one day delivery, like you said, and by the way, in my home in Los Angeles,
Hmm.
half of my packages arrive same day. Some of them, the other half are arriving the next day. There's no 2-day delivery in my area. And I suspect that Amazon's quietly building out those capabilities throughout the rest of the United States. And so here we are again, where you've got to be there. It's a necessary evil. And Amazon is literally too big to fail, even if they terrify you.
Yeah.
You've got to be there and you've got to do that. And Shopify, back to your question about will their investors have the intestinal fortitude to hang in there with them as they invest $20 billion a year? I don't think they can. And what don't they have, James, to help salve that wound of that enormous investment that they will need to make in order to build that first class fulfillment network? They don't have any ad revenue, nothing to speak of. At least Walmart is now bringing in billions of dollars in ad revenue, right? And they've got forward leaning stores. Shopify, boy, I just feel like Amazon has literally put them in check. It's not checkmate. They're not going away, but they have really put them in check on the chessboard, and they're 3 steps, 4 steps ahead of them. I don't know.
I'm going to have to think offline more about this, but the question around what should brands expect that they can get out of their Shopify site today versus what they can get in 2 years from now? While Amazon continues to improve so many of its capabilities, I think there will be a natural evolution of the use of a Shopify site, why a brand needs a Shopify site, and what they can expect to get out of it. I think that's going to continue to change, and it's going to continue to change in a way that only favors Amazon.
That's right. We're going to end on that,
Okay.
James. At least on that Shopify, Amazon to be continued discussion. I'm really looking forward to having you back on as these stories continue to unfold. But let's talk about you for a second. You have done an amazing job, founder of the Prosper Show, which you had a great exit there a couple of years ago. You co-founded Buy Box Experts, and you just stepped down. What is on the horizon for my good friend James Thomson besides hopefully more fishing trips?
I'm going to be available for webinars with you on a weekly basis if you're so inclined.
Excellent.
No, I'm
Done.
joking.
Let's do it.
I'm joking. There comes a point in every entrepreneur's life where you say, I haven't run out of ideas, but I need a break. And that's kind of where I am right now. I need a break. And the
And James, if
creative juices
anyone
are still
deserves a
there.
break,
So
if anyone deserves a break, it's you. Look, on behalf of all the sellers out there in Amazon, I want to thank you for all that you have done, and I have no doubt will continue to do. I think that the lives of sellers and brands out there, as they try to navigate this Amazon jungle, are infinitely better and easier because of all of the hard work you've put in over the years. Thank you for being my very first guest on the Day 2 podcast. I wouldn't have imagined anyone else being my first guest. Thank you for your insights, and let's plan that next fishing trip together. Okay, buddy?
sounds good. Thanks for having me on today, Jason.
Thank you, James. Thank you.